enhanced by technology and innovation. But ES8 also has a human touch. It's approachable, engaging, and exudes a warmth of character most evident in the interior and the illumination. What makes ES8 so unique is the theme of open solidity. An SUV with substance and presence, yet light and dynamic. We have created an icon of efficiency, a solid outer character that protects a warm and welcoming interior. ES8 is performance for living. The role of design at NEO has to reach much further than just designing cars. We create experiences. We design everything that the user will see, touch, hear, and feel. We strive to understand our users' lives and needs. Performance for living is our design philosophy. This philosophy unites complementary forces within the brand. On the one hand, we have built our performance credentials in our EP9 electric supercar. On the other hand, we have expressed our vision of the future with our concept car, Eve, an entirely new mobility experience for driving, living, relaxing, and connecting. These are two halves of one story, just like our logo. Performance for living is the manifestation of those forces coming together. The ES8 is the purest embodiment of this design philosophy. It is an expression of progressive premium. It is beautifully crafted. Its purity enhanced by technology and innovation. But ES8 also has a human touch. It's approachable, engaging, and exudes a warmth of character most evident in the interior and the illumination. What makes ES8 so unique is the theme of open solidity. An SUV with substance and presence, yet light and dynamic. We have created an icon of efficiency, a solid outer character that protects a warm and welcoming interior. ES8 is performance for living. role of design at NEO has to reach much further than just designing cars. We create experiences. We design everything that the user will see, touch, hear, and feel. We strive to understand our users' lives and needs. Performance for living is our design philosophy. This philosophy unites complementary forces within the brand. On the one hand, we have built our performance credentials in our EP9 electric supercar. On the other hand, we have expressed our vision of the future with our concept car Eve, an entirely new mobility experience for driving, living, relaxing, and connecting. These are two halves of one story, just like our logo. Performance for living is the manifestation of those forces coming together. The ES8 is the purest embodiment of this design philosophy. It is an expression of progressive premium. It is beautifully crafted. Its purity enhanced by technology and innovation. But ES8 also has a human touch. It's approachable, engaging, and exudes a warmth of character most evident in the interior and the illumination. What makes ES8 so unique is a theme of open solidity. An SUV with substance and presence, yet light and dynamic. We have created an icon of efficiency, a solid outer character that protects a warm and welcoming interior. ES8 is performance for living. The role of design at NEO has to reach much further than just designing cars. We create experiences. We design everything that the user will see, touch, hear, and feel. We strive to understand our users' lives and needs. Performance for living is our design philosophy. This philosophy unites complementary forces within the brand. On the one hand, we have built our performance credentials in our EP9 electric supercar. On the other hand, we have expressed our vision of the future with our concept car, Eve, an entirely new mobility experience for driving, living, relaxing, and connecting. These are two halves of one story, just like our logo. Performance for living is the manifestation of those forces coming together. The ES8 is the purest embodiment of this design philosophy. It is an expression of progressive premium. It is beautifully crafted. Its purity enhanced by technology and innovation. But ES8 also has a human touch. It's approachable, engaging, and exudes a warmth of character most evident in the interior and the illumination.
现场和屏幕前面的朋友们，大家下午好。
Hello, friends from afar as well as here. It's good to be here.
我是主持人王健，欢迎大家来到未来中心北京车展店，和我们共享 CES 盛宴。
And my name is Eric. Again, a warm welcome at this beautiful NEO house right here at the Auto Show China 2018.
那今天的主讲嘉宾呢是 Alvin Rose。美国经济学家，目前在哈佛商学院担任经济及工商管理乔治冈德教授。他设计出的复杂计算系统，帮助成千上万人择校择业，走向了成功之路。那 Alvin 因为在博弈论、市场设计和实验经济学领域做出过显著贡献，在2012年获得了诺贝尔经济学奖。那相信大家呢已经迫不及待了，就让我们有请 Alvin Rose 上场。
Without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Alvin Roth.
Thank you.
Have a good show.
Hello. It's good to be here. Let's see. I want to tell you about the transformation of markets and what might come in different kinds of marketplaces. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to try to, that's better. I'm going to try to tell you about markets and marketplaces and how they might be transformed in the years to come. And I teach at Stanford University, and this is part of a series of talks, I guess, on the future of the economy in general. So I wrote a book a couple of years ago about markets and market design. And after you've written a book, it gets translated into languages, so into Chinese and other languages. And that sort of can remind us that markets and languages have a lot in common. They're both ancient human artifacts. So we often don't think about languages as if they're artifacts. But of course, languages are tools that human beings invent in order to cooperate and coordinate with each other. And markets are like that too. And just as there are lots of different kinds of languages, lots of different languages, Chinese and English, there are lots of different kinds of markets. And often when we think about markets, we think about commodity markets like the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, and commodity markets are very special, but they're unusual kinds of markets. So let's think a little bit about what happens on the New York Stock Exchange. Supposing you would like to buy shares in some American company like IBM or Google. On a stock exchange, you don't have to know who you are buying from, and they don't have to know who they're selling to. The job of the stock exchange is just to find prices that make the transactions go through. So the job of the stock exchange is only about price. It's not about who you are dealing with, because every share of IBM is the same. You don't care which ones you're getting. You don't care whether the person who sold them to you took good care of them while he had them, and he doesn't care whether you're going to take good care of them when you have them. But it still takes some design. It takes design to figure out how to form the prices. And the commodities themselves, the shares of IBM, for instance, have to be designed. So, for example, when we read that NEO is getting ready for an initial public offering, we see that they've hired lots of banks to help them do that. And that's because you have to decide just what it is that will be sold, what rights the shares will convey, how many of them there will be, all of those things. So commodity markets take some design. But not every market is a commodity market. In lots of markets, you do care who you're dealing with. You're making a relationship, you're forming contracts. And in some of these matching markets, we don't let prices do any of the work. But in none of these matching markets, do prices do all of the work? And everyone here is familiar with matching markets because they govern some of the most important transitions in our lives. So for instance, when you go to university, you're in a matching market. Tsinghua University doesn't choose its students by raising the price until just enough students want to come. Lots of people would like to study at Tsinghua, but you can't study there just because you want to. You have to be admitted. You have to do well on the Gaokao and then be matched to Tsinghua if you're going to study there. So college admissions is a matching market. And labor markets are matching markets. You can't just come to work at NEO, you have to be hired. Okay, so these are markets where you can't just choose what you want. Even if you can afford it, you also have to be chosen. Okay, you can't just choose where to work, and if you're an employer, you can't just choose who will work to you. A match has to be made. And so matching markets are a little bit like marriage. You can't just choose your spouse, you also have to be chosen. So I'm going to use Airbnb as an example of what marketplaces do. Right? So I'm making a distinction between markets and marketplaces. There's a big market for temporary housing, but Airbnb is a marketplace for temporary housing. And they've spread around the world. I see that if I wanted to rent a room in Beijing, I could rent one through Airbnb. So let's think about what Airbnb has to do to make this market for housing successful. And I'm using Airbnb as an example, but I mean to suggest that every marketplace has to accomplish some basic tasks in order to make markets work well. So the first thing that they have to do is make the market thick. They have to bring lots, if you're Airbnb, you have to bring lots of travelers and hosts together. So Airbnb started as a website in San Francisco. And as long as they were just in San Francisco, they couldn't do much business. They couldn't make much of a market. And so what they started to do is they bought some of their competitors who were other websites. For instance, they bought CrashPatter in London. And once they owned CrashPatter, once they merged the two sites, they had travelers in England and in the United States, and they had hosts in England and the United States, so you could start to make a thicker market. Now, and every marketplace has to help its market become thick. But once you get a thick market, you have to deal with congestion. All of a sudden, there are lots of rooms you could rent around the world, and you have to figure out how to actually rent them. And in order to understand the congestion problem that Airbnb has, I invite you to think about how different they are than a hotel. Okay, so last night I stayed at the Beijing Hilton, and if you wanted to make a reservation at the Beijing Hilton, you would call them up and you would ask the receptionist, do you have a room for Friday night, say? And the receptionist could look at all the rooms at once and tell you if they had any vacancies. And if they did, you could reserve a room. But that's not the way Airbnb can work, because lots of Airbnb hosts just operate one apartment or one guest room. So if for instance, I'm offering a guest room in California and you try to reserve my room but it's already taken, then you have to try to reserve a different room. So think of how much less convenient the hotel would be if you could only try to reserve one room at a time. You'd call up the receptionist and you'd say, I'd like to have a room for Friday night. And instead of looking at all the rooms, she'd say to you, which room would you like? And you'd say, room 504. And she'd look and she'd say, I'm so sorry, room 504 is taken on Friday. And then she'd hang up the phone and you'd call back and you'd say, how about room 506? And she'd say, oh, okay, room 506 is available. Well, that's Airbnb's problem. If I'm renting a guest room and you try to reserve it, but it's already taken, you have to try again with a different place. Okay? So Airbnb has done a lot of work to overcome this congestion. If someone is trying to rent my guest room, it disappears from everyone else's app and browser so that no one else tries to rent it at the same time. And in many countries around the world, Airbnb has now introduced an instant reservation application, which allows hosts to say anyone with above a certain reputation may rent my room without being confirmed. So that helps them get through the congestion problem. So marketplaces have to help markets be thick. They have to help them deal with congestion. And they have to be trustworthy and safe. So when you look at a picture of an Airbnb room, one of the things you want to know is, when I get to the apartment, will it really look like the picture? And will it be clean? And one of the things the host wants to know is, are you someone who has experience being a good guest? And so Airbnb and many other internet marketplaces have developed reputation tools to allow you to show that you've been a good guest and allow me to show that my guest room has been satisfactory for many previous guests. So marketplaces have to do all of these things, otherwise we won't hear of them. They won't succeed. So I've been involved in the course of my career in designing some unusual matching markets. I'm going to just mention them briefly to you on this slide, and then I'm going to tell you about more usual matching markets. So I've been involved in helping design labor markets in the United States, and in particular, the labor markets through which American doctors get their first jobs is a set of labor markets that my colleagues and I have helped design. And those are markets where prices are important. Doctors earn wages and they care what the wages are, but the prices don't decide who gets what. The prices don't determine the match. And indeed, when you get a new job, the first thing your friends and family will ask you is not what's the salary, how much money do you make? The first thing they'll ask you is, where are you working, right? So the match is important in a way that's quite separate from the wage. My colleagues and I have also helped design school choice mechanisms in the United States, how we assign children to schools. And the closest thing I'm familiar with here in China is the Gaokao, the college admissions process. And the Gaokao has undergone a lot of changes in the last 10 or 15 years, and so has school choice in the United States, sometimes for some of the same reasons. In many cities in the United States, it was risky for families to try to tell the city what was their first choice and second choice and third choice schools, because under the old systems of school choice, if you didn't get your first choice, you might drop down and do very badly. And so you had to think not just what's my first choice school, but what's the best school I can get if I say that it's my first choice. And in Boston and Denver and New Orleans and in New York and some other cities, we've now fixed that. We've developed systems so that if you don't get your first choice, your chance of getting your second choice will be just as great as if you had said it was your first choice. And that gives families the ability to truthfully reveal their preferences. And it's much easier to give families what they want if they can safely tell you what they want. So a third matching market I've been involved with has to do with organ transplantation, and kidneys have to be well matched to patients in order to work properly. And you can see a picture of me in the operating room there. I'm in the yellow gown, keeping my hands out of the way so that no one hands me anything. And in the United States, kidney exchange has now become a standard form of transplantation. And it's a kind of marketplace in which no money plays a role at all in deciding who gets which organ. But of course, there are lots more usual markets. And let's think a little bit about matchmaking. And the first way to think about matchmaking is to think about marriage. And of course, there's traditional matchmaking like the Shanghai People's Park marriage, where I gather mostly parents come to help match their children. But with new technology, there are new forms of marketplaces. So today there are lots of internet matchmaking markets of various sorts. And on the left are ones that are like the People's Park marriage market. That is, they're interested in matrimony and dating and romance. And they have many different market designs. I mostly know the ones that operate in the US rather than, J1 come. But some of them show you the whole world. You go on the site and you see many, many people and information about them. And you have to try to make your own match. And others try to help you make a match. They try to show you a small group of people who they think you might like. And some of them try to show you very little information and make matching very fast. So they all have different market designs. And on the right here are non-romantic matching markets like Uber and Didi, which try to match passengers to cars, or Airbnb, I don't have it here, but they try to match travelers to hosts, and Google, which tries to match browsers and advertisers, and Upwork, which tries to match people who do computer programming with people who need jobs of computer programming done. So there are lots of different kinds of matching markets that are made possible by new technology. And of course, at an auto show, it makes sense to think about ride sharing, which has exploded around the world. You no longer have to have a car in order to be able to ride in a car, and it's not just taxis anymore. You can now hail a car with your smartphone, and around the world there are ride-sharing services that are a lot like Didi here in China. Now, notice that new marketplaces become possible when new technology becomes possible. So, Taobao and eBay, they became possible when the internet became available. As soon as you had the internet, you could start showing the things you wanted to sell to the whole world. Here's this nice bottle of water. Who would like to buy it? Instead of just showing it to my neighbors, I can show it to everyone. So the internet was a great technology for that kind of marketplace. But the internet wouldn't have worked for ride sharing. Ride sharing had to wait for smartphones, right? You can't do ride sharing unless you have a way to communicate with the car wherever you are, because that's where you need the car. And your smartphone, not only can you use it to try to get a car wherever you are, it knows where you are. So it can communicate with the car, and it knows where the cars are. The app knows where the cars are, so they can try to do some matching of matching you to a close car. And by and large, that's the job of matching for a ride-sharing service. It's to match you to someplace close. Okay? So we're starting to see, and we're going to see more of, computer-aided markets, and computers play a bunch of different roles. They keep records. When you buy something on the internet, the computer helps remember who bought what from whom at what price. They can be trusted intermediaries. They can run auctions to determine the price. Okay? They can be fast, as they have to be for ad auctions. If you're browsing on the web and someone wants to show you an advertisement, they have to do it as soon as you download the page. And computers can be very fast. They can be smart. Think about Didi, which doesn't just get you a car, it has to try to find you a car close to where you are and try to find everyone cars close to where they are. So there's some optimization going on in the background. And they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Now that we have smartphones, you're never far from a marketplace. You have marketplaces in your pocket, wherever you want to reach them. And I think when we think about cars, it helps to think a little bit about computing as well, because there are now markets for computing that there never used to be. You can rent, you can access through markets computers in the cloud. When I save my files, I save them on an app called Dropbox, which means they're saved on computers that I don't own. They're saved somewhere else. But what that means is there are lots of companies that there are now companies that run big data centers. They buy lots and lots of computers. And there can be other companies that only use them when they need them. So the market for computers has become a bit like the market for ride sharing. You can access a lot of computing power when you need it and not own it when you don't need it. So one of the things that computerized markets do is they change how much privacy we have. So let's think a little bit about that, because computers change our privacy in two ways. First, they're very good at remembering things, but they also make things easy to combine. So in the United States, there are lots of facts about me that were always available as public knowledge if you were willing to work hard. So before computers, you could go to a courthouse and find out if I was married. You could go possibly to a different courthouse and find out how much I paid for my house. You could combine lots of information about me. But when those bits of information are on computerized databases, they can be combined very easily. So you can quickly assemble a profile that tells you a lot about me. Am I married? Do I have children? Do I own a house? Have I been convicted of a driving offense? So let's think a little bit about what computerized markets know about us that used to be more private than it is now and is no longer so private. Okay? So first, they know about our social networks. So what do I mean by our social networks? I mean our friends, the people who we send messages to, our correspondents, and sometimes the message that we send, our correspondence, right? In English, those two words have the same sound, the people you talk to and what you say to them. And depending on what kind of sites you use to send email and text messages, both of those things may be preserved. Computerized markets can also look at your shopping behavior. And even before computers, we could have some idea what you buy. We could look at your clothes, we could look at your car, we could see what you bought. But when you shop online, we can also see what you looked at and didn't buy. We can see how you shopped. And so people who are interested in selling you things can look at a lot more about your shopping behavior than they used to be. The things you considered are no longer private. That's true of all your web browsing. And of course, it's true of your location. Your smartphone knows where you are. That's why you can use it to get a ride. But that means that people who know where your phone is can learn a lot about you. If I have your phone location data, I can probably figure out where you live, because for many people, that's where their phone is at night. Your phone is at your home. And I can probably figure out if you're romantically involved with someone, because I can see who else is with you at night and where their phone is. And I can certainly figure out where you work. That's probably where your phone is during the day. And I can figure out what your favorite after-work activities are. That's where you go when you get away from work. So knowing your phone data already tells me a lot about you. And I don't have to listen to your calls. I just have to know where you are in order to know these things about you. So what we've seen so far is that marketplaces are growing, and they're getting more and more important because lots of the newest and most interesting businesses are themselves marketplaces. Not all markets are commodity markets. A lot are matching markets. And matching markets need different capabilities. So let's again think about Airbnb and Didi and how you interface with them. When you want to call a car on Didi, you just ask for the kind of car you want, and Didi does the match, because they understand pretty much correctly that what you're mostly interested in is the nearest car, the one that can come the quickest. Airbnb can't do that. You don't say to Airbnb, I'd like a room in Beijing, and they find you one. You don't even say, I'd like a room in Beijing near the auto show, and they could find you the closest room to the auto show. But that wouldn't work for Airbnb, because different people like different apartments. And so Airbnb, instead of matching you automatically with an apartment, it shows you a lot of pictures and description, and you have to try to make the match yourself. So there are a big variety of matching markets, and they're going to use different technology to make matches. Okay? And computers, of course, allow markets to do these things more and better than they used to do. And as a result, privacy isn't the same. So that's something we're going to have to learn to deal with in the years to come. Now, we've thought about how computers change markets. Let's think about how self-driving cars might change the markets for car trips and for cars. Okay? one thing we can ask is, when cars can drive themselves, will that increase the number of trips? And I think it will, because it's easier to be a passenger than to be a driver. You can go on a trip while doing something else. Maybe that will make you want to go on more trips. Even when you're busy, you can be moving in the car if you don't have to drive it. And will this increase traffic on the roads? Now, traffic in English means two different things. It means how many cars are on the roads, and are the roads congested? Sometimes we say there's traffic only when we mean there's a lot of traffic and things are going slowly. So if we're going to have more trips, we're going to have new ways of dealing with congestion, of dealing with all those car trips so that they don't take too long, so that you get where you're going quickly. And so I think when we think about self-driving cars, we're going to have to think about self-driving cars plus fast automatic electronic communication between your self-driving car and other parts of the environment. So in particular, your car will be able to communicate with other cars on the road. And that might allow traffic on highways, for example, to go faster, because maybe cars will be able to be closer to each other at high speeds when they can communicate with each other and know where everyone is and when anyone is slowing down. And your car will also have to be able to communicate with traffic control. It'll have to know when there's a red light. But once it can do that, it can also tell when there is going to be a red light, right? There's no reason your car won't be able to communicate with the lights and know in advance what they're going to do, and that should help move traffic as well. And of course, in many cities in the world, we already see congestion pricing. We're charging for access to certain roads at certain times. To go into London during the week, you have to pay a fee, and I think they use photographs of your license. But with better electronics and with cars that can communicate, we'll be able to make this billing seamless and automatic and change it as some roads get crowded, and we try to make them less crowded by charging more to drive on them. So you and your car will be able to decide dynamically what route to take in order to reduce congestion. And of course, knowing where there are available parking spots will be a very useful thing for your self-driving car to know. In San Francisco, near where I live, it's estimated that at the peak traffic hours, when there are the most cars driving around the streets, 30% of them are looking for parking. And if they knew where parking was, there'd be less traffic and traffic would move faster. So communication as well as self-drivingness is going to help us deal with congestion. So let's think about ride sharing like Didi. How will having more auto-driving cars change the market for driving? And predicting the future is the hardest thing to predict. So these are just guesses. Okay? So let's think about how a ride-sharing service like Didi works. Lots of Didi trips have just one destination. One passenger calls the car and goes to one place, and then the trip ends. But some of the Didi services and other kinds of services involve multiple passengers. You could share the car with multiple people. And one of the reasons that's a little less attractive for passengers and drivers is many stops make the trip take longer. But as we have better computerized matching, we'll be better able to put people together in the car who are going to very similar places and schedule them along a route that won't take too much longer. And of course, right now it's both the passengers and the drivers who suffer from the longer trip. But once we don't have drivers, it'll again be less expensive to schedule multiple stops because we won't have to worry about the driver. And thinking about drivers, right now, a ride-sharing service like Didi offers two kinds of drivers, really. There's the professional or semi-professional drivers who are out trying to earn some money using their cars. And then there are the commuters who, in the morning, go to work and in the evening come back from work along a pretty usual route and might be willing to pick someone up who's going to a similar place. Of course, once the cars drive themselves, there won't be any difference between the kinds of drivers, and so I think we'll see those two services merging, and there'll be more carpooling. So how about employment? So here's a picture from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. And what it says is it says about 300,000 people in the United States drive cars or Ubers or limousines, things like that. And it's not a very good job. They don't make very much money. And of course, if we start to have self-driving cars, many of these people will lose their jobs. And we'll have to think about how to take care of them. That's not something, at least in the United States, that's not something we've always done so well in the past, taking care of people who lose their jobs as part of a technological transition. But in the long term, I'm not worried that we'll all lose our jobs. What has happened in the past is, as some jobs go away, other jobs increase. And so here's another picture from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about auto mechanics. And what it says is auto mechanics is a much better job. Auto mechanics are paid much more than taxi drivers. And of course, then when we start having more car trips with more complicated cars, we're going to need more auto mechanics. And so I anticipate that there'll be a shift in employment, not that employment opportunities will go away. And we've seen things like this with other automation. When automated bank tellers were first introduced to the United States, the first thing it did was it replaced human bank tellers. If you had a bank that used to employ 12 tellers, now you had 6 bank machines and 3 tellers, and there was less employment. But that made it easier to open new bank branches. It made it easier to open new locations for your bank. And over time, as banks started to have many locations, that increased the employment in banks, because each bank had only 3 tellers, but there were now many banks. So once again, I think we can't always anticipate what will be the effect on employment of labor-saving devices like automated driving. And of course, in 1900, so at the beginning of the last century, half of Americans worked in agriculture. And the transition was a tough one. Some of the people who lost their agricultural jobs never found as good a job again. But today, we don't miss those jobs. It's nice to work indoors in an air-conditioned space on a hot day and not to be an agricultural worker. So today, only less than 2% of Americans work in agriculture. Okay, so we can start to see a possible future with self-driving cars. Ride-sharing may become more like public transportation. It'll be a way for people to take cars along maybe with other people, perhaps along fixed routes. The competition among ride services will be different. You know, one of the very interesting things about the market for rides right now is that the competition proceeds on 2 levels. If Didi and Uber are competing with each other, they have to compete for passengers. And to compete for passengers, you try to keep the prices low. But they also have to compete for drivers. And to compete for drivers, you try to keep the wages high. And to keep the wages high, that puts an upward pressure on prices. So competition between ride-sharing services is very complex now. It'll get a lot simpler when there are no drivers. Then it'll just be a competition for passengers, for customers. And as I've said, I think carpooling will become a big thing. And road congestion will be very, very important to deal with, because if, as I imagine, there are more rides, there'll be more cars on the road. But maybe we can manage the congestion better with the technology that will come with ride sharing. So in general, when we look into the future, new markets of all kinds are coming, and they're going to be facilitated by new kinds of marketplaces, just like, you know, Didi and Uber are new marketplaces. And we'll need to think about how to handle these things and how to use the technology and have it not use us. And markets are going to get more and more ubiquitous. Your children will never remember having been far from a market, right? Once you have smartphones, I think they're never going to go away. And so privacy is going to remain very important. Privacy and how we adapt to it. We are probably going to have to get used to having less privacy than we used to have, but we may also have to develop lots of new customs and rules and even technology to guard the privacy that most needs guarding. And that will be a big thing in the years to come. So just as computers have made big changes in marketplaces, I think self-driving cars also will. And part of the story about economics is it's a shared adventure in which we all participate. So it's one thing to anticipate the future, and it's another thing to live it, and we're all going to do that. Thank you.
好的，感谢 Ross 教授的精彩分享，谢谢。那相信短短20分钟的这个介绍呢，大家还是意犹未尽的状态。那接下来就到了我们这个 Q&A 的环节。那如果有朋友在听到这个讲座之前有什么问题想问到 Ross 教授的话，可以举手来提问。那同时呢，在这个环节中，我们给大家准备了5本 Ross 教授的著作《共享经济》。那同时在这本书上已经有了 Ross 教授的亲笔签名。所以想和大咖互动的朋友们可以抓住机会。
So please seize the opportunities.
Yes, hello.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring speech, and from the Xinhua News Agency. So I will ask a question about what do you think about the car accidents occurred by the self-driving cars? So what do you think the future for the self-driving cars, and about the China's market, how Chinese self-driving cars will influence the whole picture of the world? Thank you.
Well, the question about accidents is a good one. Of course, in the United States, and I bet in China also, there are lots of accidents with human-driven cars. And we deal with those with road regulations and with laws and traffic rules. So I think my guess is once we get good at self-driving cars, there will be fewer accidents. But we'll need new laws to handle them. Those will be part of the marketplace rules of the road. Because right now, if I'm driving my car and I run it into your car, I'm responsible. I was the driver and I hit your car. It's less clear who is responsible if my self-driving car hits your self-driving car. Maybe it's the maker of the car, maybe it's somebody else. So I think that to think about accidents, we're going to need to think about legal liability and things like that. And China is a huge part of the world economy. I'm sure that Chinese automated cars will make a big contribution, both technologically and in terms of the Chinese economy. Sir?
I have a question about the privacy. Yes, everything in the world is smarter and smarter, including Neil. Every car owner has a special ID. He knows where I live, where I'm working, and what's my driving behavior. And it's a camera in front of me all the time. Do you have concern about the privacy, or do you like the car like this?
Well, my guess is there are already a lot of people who know about you, and they don't need a camera. I have a student named Keith Chen, who now teaches at UCLA, at University of California in Los Angeles. And he recently did a study of Thanksgiving dinners in the United States and how long they were before and after President Trump was elected. And the way he did this is first he identifies where you live, then he identifies, from data on your phone, which he can buy in bulk, then he identifies where you had Thanksgiving the previous year by where you were on Thanksgiving between noon and 5 o'clock. Then he sees if you went to the same place this year, and then he checks the time. And what he sees is that Thanksgiving dinners were shorter, and he imagines they're because of political arguments. But the fact that he can buy data that tells him where people live, where they had Thanksgiving, how long it is, he didn't need a camera. He didn't need their car. He could just use their phone. So I think that we're giving away our privacy in many of our interactions, not just in cars. Car is a natural one to think about your location, but we may already be able to determine your location. So I am worried about privacy. I don't think that cars present a special threat to privacy. Yes. Sir.
Thank you very much for your speech. You gave the example of auto mechanics in the presentation. Do you have other examples of shared venture or win-win strategies related to China auto market?
So I don't offhand. I don't know enough about the Chinese market, but employment in China has probably grown over the last century, even as all these technological advances are coming in. More people enter the paid labor force. That's certainly been true in the United States. So in that respect, I'm a techno-optimist. I think that in the long term, the economy is growing. That does not make me an optimist for the short term. For many years, I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was once a center of the U.S. steel industry. Now, as rail transport became more expensive and sea transport became cheaper, much of the steel trade moved to international trade, and many of the steel mills closed. The children of those steel workers are all gainfully employed today. They're all doing other things. But a middle-aged steel worker whose mill closed might never have found as good a job again. So I think that we do have to worry about the people displaced by automation, even though their children will not be displaced. That's a long-term view, and the long-term view is not the only one to worry about. Yes, sir. That man needs a microphone.
我有一个问题，就是想
I have a question.
你看好未来汽车的未来吗？
So do you think that the future of NIO is promising? Why?
I think that the future of electric vehicles and of autonomous vehicles are both promising, and therefore I think that NIO is in a position to have a promising future.
好的，最后一个名额。
Yes, madam.
教授您好，感谢您刚才的
Hello, thank you very much for your introduction.
比较开放性的
I have a very open question for you.
目前来说，在中国人
So
工智能
far,
的这个话题
when it comes to autonomous driving in China, this is a very heated topic.
带来未来的一些影响，有很多的讨论。
We have a lot of discussion about the influence of AI.
人工智能未来的发展。
So regarding the development of AI, what do you think is an influence on market design?
影响或者说是推动力？谢谢。
Thank you.
I think I only got part of your question. But artificial intelligence is going to affect market design in a few ways. Already I told you about some markets that use at least a little bit of intelligence to make the match, to figure out who should be matched to whom. But one of the adventures that artificial intelligence will bring us on is it will become possible not just to design the market, but to design some of the participants in the market. You'll be able to have avatars who help you intersect with the market. You'll say to your artificial intelligent assistant, I want to fly to San Francisco and get a hotel room there, and I'll need a car from the airport. And so it won't be you personally participating in the market for airfare and drivers and hotels, but your AI assistant. And I think that will be a big difference as well, because the markets will have to respond to the fact that they will also be dealing with intelligences.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for today.
Okay, thank you very much.
好的，谢谢。那今天的 CIS 呢，就到这里就要结束了。让我们再次感谢 Aaron Ross。
Thank you once again, Professor Ross.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks.
好，那下一场呢，我们将迎来2014年诺贝尔生理学或医学奖得主 Edward Moser。那再次感谢大家的到来和关注，谢谢大家，明天见。
All right, that's it.
Okay, let's
Thank
go.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.